Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, it's never enough? Like you're constantly performing, adjusting, pleasing, and yet something inside you still feels empty? Maybe you've spent years trying to be what others expected. Maybe you've worn masks for so long that you forgot how your own soul feels. But what if I told you that everything starts to change the moment you stop caring? Yes, the moment you let go of the need for approval, the moment you stop obsessing over what others think of you. The universe begins to shift in your favor. This isn't just a mindset, it's a spiritual turning point, a mystical threshold where your anxiety starts to dissolve, your true voice begins to rise, and a deeper sense of peace, the kind that can't be bought or faked, finally finds you. Today I'm going to guide you through a journey of awakening inspired by the timeless wisdom of Carl Jung. You'll uncover the invisible prisons you've been living in, the unconscious fears that keep you small, and the ancient power that returns when you reclaim your authenticity. This isn't about becoming someone new, it's about remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. Most people will never take this path. They'll keep playing roles trapped in cycles of insecurity and noise. But you, if you're here, you're ready. Ready to go beyond the surface, to meet yourself, to finally reconnect with the truth the universe has been whispering to you all along. This video could be the mirror your soul has been waiting for. And before we begin, a gentle reminder. So many of you watch these messages and feel them in your hearts, but you're not subscribed. If this content speaks to your spirit, if it helps you remember who you are, subscribe now to Celestial Truths, because what you'll discover today has the power to shift not only your perception, but your path, and we're just getting started. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the veil begins to lift, when one starts to feel that strange, aching dissonance between who they truly are and who they've been conditioned to be. From childhood, the seeds are planted. You're praised when you conform, rewarded when you follow, loved when you obey. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the psyche begins to mold itself not in the image of its essence, but in the expectations of others. This is the birth of the invisible prison, the silent structure built not of stone or steel, but of glances, grades, likes, and quiet nods of approval. In this subtle architecture, the soul becomes a shadow, hiding behind masks so carefully crafted that even the wearer forgets who they were before they wore them. The need to be seen, accepted, validated, it runs deep, deeper than logic. It's a whisper from the ancestral unconscious, where the tribe meant survival. To be rejected was to risk death. And so, even today, under city lights and digital stars, the old fear persists. People bend, twist, shrink themselves to fit into molds that were never made for them. In this effort to belong, they exile the parts of themselves that feel too much or not enough. But here's the sacred paradox. The more we abandon who we are to be loved, the more unloved we feel. The universe does not echo falsehoods, only truth resonates in the divine pattern of existence. There's a subtle sadness that comes from living for applause. It's the ache behind a forced smile, the fatigue that no rest cures. The spirituality of the soul begins to wither when its light is dimmed for the sake of fitting in. You may notice it during mundane conversations where your true voice wants to speak but hesitates, fearing disapproval. You feel it in those quiet moments alone, wondering, who am I when no one is watching? That question is not a curse, it's a portal, a mystical crack in the mask, inviting you back home, home to yourself. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that privilege comes with a price, the courage to disappoint others. And that's terrifying, isn't it? To walk away from the script, from the roles you've been praised for. Yet the soul cannot evolve within the confines of a cage, even if that cage is made of gold. It is in the act of removing the mask, layer by layer, that the alchemical fire is lit. Through this fire, the fragmented self begins to fuse, igniting the mystic path of individuation. So, what do we do with this awareness? We start small. We begin to observe gently, compassionately, the ways we censor ourselves for approval. We track our emotional weather, noticing the storms that arise when we feel unseen or unloved. We listen to dreams, for they speak in symbols when words are insufficient. We engage in reflective journaling, asking, whose approval am I still chasing, and why? These practices are not mere habits. They are rituals of liberation. As we deepen into this process, the next truth begins to emerge, not just about how we seek approval, but why we cling to control. And that, dear seeker, opens the doorway to the next layer of the journey. There's a hidden tension beneath the surface of modern life, a restless yearning to control the uncontrollable, to control how others perceive us, to control outcomes, relationships, success. It's subtle, yet all-consuming, like a spell cast over the collective psyche, whispering that if we just try hard enough, anticipate enough, please enough, we'll finally feel safe. But this illusion, though seductive, is built on shifting sand. The universe, in its infinite dance, has never promised certainty. And still, we cling to the fantasy that we can shape reality according to our fears. But the more we grasp, the more it slips through our fingers, like trying to catch fog with bare hands. This craving for control is not born from strength, but from a place of deep spiritual unrest, a disconnection from the natural flow of life. Carl Jung spoke often of the unconscious forces that move us, invisible rivers beneath our thoughts and actions. When we ignore these currents and try to impose rigid order, we only tighten the knot of our anxiety. The soul doesn't respond well to micromanagement. It longs for surrender, not submission, a sacred trust in the unfolding. But for many, surrender feels like weakness, and so we build walls, routines, identities that make us feel in charge. Yet beneath the surface, the anxiety grows, humming like a distant storm. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to keep every detail under control? To manage your image, your relationships, your emotions, all at once? It's like playing chess with the wind, and the cost is steep. Chronic stress, burnout, sleepless nights, a growing sense of disconnection. This is not just psychological, it is spirituality asking to be heard. The soul communicates through imbalance, not to punish, but to awaken. When life feels tight, rigid, or suffocating, it may be a call to loosen your grip, to stop fighting the tide and learn to float with it. There is mystic wisdom in chaos, if we dare to listen. In the symbolic realm, control is often represented by the tyrant archetype, the inner voice that demands perfection, dominance, and fear-based power. This tyrant may wear many faces: the ideal student, the flawless partner, the unstoppable achiever. But behind every tyrant lies a terrified child, afraid of being powerless. Individuation, the sacred psychological process of becoming whole, requires us to face that child, not with scorn, but with deep compassion. It asks us to trace the roots of our control issues back to the wounds that birthed them. Only then can the energy be transmuted into authentic strength and presence. To release control is not to give up, it is to realign, to trust that the mystic intelligence of life knows more than your fear does. Try it in small ways. Let a plan change without resistance. Allow someone to misunderstand you without rushing to explain. Watch your breath without trying to change it. These are simple acts, yet they hold the power to shift your entire state of being. As you soften into this practice, you'll begin to feel something unexpected. Not chaos, but clarity. Not loss, but peace. And from that stillness, another truth will rise. The fear that drives control isn't about the world. It's about your own sense of worth. And that, dear soul, leads us deeper into the sacred confrontation with the fear of not being enough. At the very heart of the human journey lies a wound so ancient, so deeply embedded in the psyche, that most carry it without ever naming it. The fear of not being enough. Not beautiful enough, not smart enough, not successful, loved, strong, spiritual enough. This silent dread doesn't scream, it whispers. It lingers in the pauses of conversation, in the mirror before sleep, in the subtle ache of comparison. It is the shadow cast by a culture that equates worth with performance and identity with appearance. In this distorted mirror, the soul forgets its divine origin and begins to measure itself through external fragments. But how can a spark of the universe ever be reduced to numbers, titles, or likes? This fear doesn't begin in adulthood. It begins in the subtle glances of disappointment from authority figures, in the comparison to siblings, classmates, strangers. Over time, the inner child internalizes a dangerous story. I must become something better than what I am, or I won't be loved. And so we begin to chase, endlessly, anxiously. The career, the body, the partner, the purpose. Each pursuit feels urgent, like a test we must pass. But deep inside, there's a gnawing void that no accomplishment seems to fill. That void is not a flaw. It is the voice of the self, calling us back to a forgotten truth. You were never meant to prove yourself to a world that does not see your essence. Carl Jung often spoke of the tension between the persona and the shadow, between who we pretend to be and what we fear we are. This fear of inadequacy is, in truth, the gateway to wholeness. It's a spiritual trial wrapped in psychological disguise. The pain we feel when we believe we're not enough is not a punishment. It's a summons, a call to descend into the underworld of the psyche and retrieve the lost parts of ourselves that we once disowned. The ones we believed were too strange, too emotional, too weak, too different. But these parts, yes, even the awkward, the wounded, the uncertain, are sacred. They are fragments of the soul waiting to be welcomed home. To walk the path of spirituality is to question the entire foundation upon which your self-worth has been built. It is to ask with reverence and honesty, who am I when I am not performing? This inquiry is not intellectual, it's visceral. It arises in quiet moments, in dreams, in the way your body tenses at the fear of rejection. It reveals itself in the choices you make. Do you say yes to please others, or because your spirit resonates with it? Every decision becomes a mirror, showing whether you are moving from fear or from truth. And each mirror, if gazed into long enough, eventually reflects back the face of the self, untouched by the illusions of inadequacy. Begin here. Notice when you shrink yourself in conversations, when you hide your ideas, when you apologize for simply existing. Write them down. Speak them aloud in a safe space. Bring light to the shadows. This is more than healing, and it's a mystical act of remembrance. Because in truth, nothing in nature asks the moon to be brighter or the ocean to be quieter. The mystic current of life simply is, vast, unapologetic, whole, and so are you. But to embody this truth, one must also recognize the forces that profit from your doubt. And that, dear traveler, is where the veil begins to lift, and the system behind your insecurities is all revealed. There's a hidden machinery turning behind the curtain of modern life, a well-oiled system designed not to heal your insecurities, but to perpetuate them. It thrives in silence, in doubt, in the moments you question your own reflection. This system doesn't want you to feel whole. In fact, your wholeness would bankrupt it, because in a world where self-worth is elusive, everything becomes a product. The flawless skin, the perfect body, the success formula, the spiritual shortcut, all sold as sacred keys to make you better, while subtly reinforcing the lie that you were never enough to begin with. In this web of illusions, spirituality becomes commodified, turned into a trend rather than a path, and the soul is left starving beneath the glittering surface. From a Jungian lens, this is a collective projection, the shadow of an entire society that disowns vulnerability, then sells it back in digestible, marketable pieces. You're told to fix your face, your mind, your emotions, but not in ways that lead to integration. No, instead, the fixes come as band-aids for a deeper wound, the disconnection from the self. And so you buy, consume, hustle, compare. The system feeds on your longing, not because it understands it, but because it can monetize it. Even the mystical gets swallowed by the market. Sacred symbols become logos. Ancient wisdom becomes branding. The universe, in its vastness, is squeezed into curated content designed to keep you scrolling instead of awakening. This isn't about rejecting beauty, success, or desire. It's about seeing clearly, about reclaiming your inner compass so you're no longer manipulated by manufactured lack. Ask yourself, how many of your goals were actually born from your soul, and how many were planted there by an ad, a trend, an influencer's lifestyle? The path of individuation requires that we peel back these layers, not with judgment, but with curiosity. It asks that we listen to the quiet voice beneath, the noise, that we learn to distinguish between authentic mystic yearning and synthetic desire. The tragedy is that many seekers, in pursuit of healing, are funneled into this very machine. They buy courses they don't need, follow gurus who promise enlightenment in 10 steps, adorn themselves with spiritual aesthetics, while their inner world remains fragmented. Real growth doesn't come in a bottle or a checklist. It arises through discomfort, reflection, confrontation, through the slow, honest work of unlearning. True spirituality is raw, humbling, transformative, not marketable. It's in the dreams that shake you, the silence that unsettles you, the shadow work that strips away illusion after illusion until only the self remains, trembling and radiant. And yet there's hope, because once you see the game, you can no longer play it unconsciously. You begin to choose differently, to pause before the purchase, to ask, is this feeding my soul or my fear? You start to feel when something resonates as truth or manipulation, and slowly you turn inward, toward the sacred, the slow, the real, toward the subtle freedom that emerges not from adding more, but from releasing. And that release, dear seeker, is where the magic begins. Because in letting go, we approach the mystery of true liberation, the art of detachment. There is a moment in every awakening where a strange peace begins to emerge, not because everything is perfect, but because the soul no longer demands that it be. This is the quiet revolution of detachment, not the cold indifference often mistaken for strength, but a warm, grounded knowing that your essence is not tethered to the ever-shifting tides of approval, outcomes, or identity. In the sacred language of the soul, detachment is not rejection. It is realignment, a return to the rhythm of the universe, where things come and go as part of a greater order. To detach is to stop resisting the flow, and in doing so, to finally feel at home within it. So many cling to pain disguised as purpose, to relationships that mirror wounds, to goals that echo societal scripts, to beliefs inherited but never questioned. But nothing can evolve when it's shackled by fear. Detachment invites us to release the illusion that our happiness must come from outside, from people, from achievements, from a very specific version of how life should look. It teaches us to hold life lightly, to appreciate without possession, to love without control. This is not abandonment. This is sovereignty. The deepest act of spirituality is not to renounce the world, but to stop needing it to validate who you are. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming whole, a psychic alchemy where all parts of the self are brought into harmony. But how can we hear the voice of the self if we are drowning in noise? Detachment is the silence between the notes, the space where insight arises. It's the mystical breath between cycles of becoming and unbecoming. When we stop clinging, we start sensing. When we release, we receive. The anxious grasp for certainty is replaced by a trust in synchronicity, in the mysterious choreography of the universe, which often guides us not through logic, but through symbols, dreams, and patterns that speak in a language older than words. Practice it. Let go of being right. Let go of being liked. Let go of needing the outcome to match the plan. Notice how the body responds, perhaps at first with fear, then slowly with freedom. Observe how life reorganizes itself when you stop forcing it. This is where real power begins, not in domination, but in surrender. Not passive surrender, but conscious choice. The choice to let life unfold without trying to grip it by the throat. The mystic knows that what is meant for the soul cannot be missed, and what leaves was never yours to begin with. This is the paradox of liberation. Only those who release can truly receive. And so, with each breath, you begin to understand. Freedom isn't the absence of attachment. It's the presence of inner clarity, a clarity that arises when your worth is no longer on trial, when the silence no longer terrifies you, when your identity isn't built on fleeting things. In this stillness, something ancient stirs, the sacred remembrance of your essence, and as the need to please, to control, to prove begins to fade, a deeper truth takes root, that what you once feared losing was never the source of your light. Your light was always within, and now, dear traveler, you are ready to feel what true freedom tastes like, and to hear the call of authenticity that begins where caring too much once lived. There's a quiet power in the moment you stop asking for permission to exist. It doesn't roar, it hums. It arrives not with fanfare but with a deep exhale. It's the moment when judgment becomes background noise, and the opinions that once dictated your every move dissolve into irrelevance. This is not rebellion for the sake of ego. It's the return to essence, because when you no longer care what others think of your path, you begin to actually walk it, unapologetically, deliberately, in rhythm with the universe, not the crowd. And that's where freedom begins to bloom, quietly, inwardly, gloriously. You see, caring too much is often confusion in disguise. It's the mistaken belief that your value is external, fragile, and negotiable. So you perform, you conform, you adjust and contort just to avoid criticism. But no matter how carefully you shape your image, someone will still misunderstand you. That's the trick. You can't control perception, only your alignment. Carl Jung once said that we are not what happened to us, but what we choose to become. And to become whole, you must stop trying to be palatable. The self doesn't seek to be liked, it seeks to be true. And truth is rarely comfortable, but always liberating. This isn't about becoming cold or closed off, quite the opposite. When you stop over-caring, you open space for authentic connection. You're no longer interacting from fear, but from presence. You're not trying to impress, you're simply expressing. That's where real intimacy begins. That's when others see your soul, not your performance. And while not everyone will understand, the ones who do, they'll see you clearly. There's something deeply mystic about someone who lives in alignment. It radiates. It inspires without trying. It invites others to drop their masks too, creating sacred space for truth to rise. But how do you get there? How do you stop caring in a world that profits from your self-doubt? You start by noticing where your energy leaks, which thoughts drain you, which interactions feel like self-betrayal. You practice choosing silence over explanation, stillness over reaction. You listen to your body, the tightening of your chest, the knot in your stomach. Signs from the universe that you're abandoning yourself again. Use these as guideposts. Write them down, reflect, meditate. Reclaim the ground of your being, one small decision at a time. And then, one day, something shifts. You walk into a room and no longer scan it for approval. You speak and don't rehearse. You make a choice that honors your truth even if it disappoints someone else. And in that moment, in that sacred, ordinary moment, you realize freedom was never out there. It was the space you cleared inside you when you stopped letting others live your life. From here, a new energy begins to emerge, not forceful but grounded, a quiet strength, a still flame. And with it, the natural consequence of authenticity begins to unfold. Respect. And that, dear seeker, is the next unfolding truth. There's a sacred irony in the journey of the soul. The very thing you were chasing, the respect, the admiration, the recognition, only begins to arrive when you stop chasing it. When you choose to be real instead of impressive, grounded instead of perfect. There's a quiet magnetism in authenticity. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply shines, steadily, undeniably, like a flame that knows its place in the dark. And people feel it. Without knowing why, they respond to it. Because in a world addicted to masks, the unmasked presence of someone who truly knows themselves is revolutionary. That's where spirituality becomes not something you do, but something you are. The soul, when embodied in truth, carries a frequency. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming one's whole self, distinct and integrated. It is not a path of ego, but of inner coherence. And the more aligned you are with your essence, the less you tolerate falseness, within and without. This alignment generates an energy that speaks louder than words. You no longer need to prove anything. Your being becomes the message. That's what others respect. Not your status, not your perfection, but your inner congruence. They may not always agree with you, but they sense that you are rooted in something real and that commands reverence. True mystic power doesn't seek applause. It moves through silence, intention, integrity. It's seen in those who walk away from what doesn't resonate, even when it's popular. In those who say no, without guilt. In those who remain soft while being strong. These souls do not impose themselves. They embody themselves. And that embodiment is contagious. It gives others permission to drop their performance too, creating a ripple. Effect of liberation. Respect, then, is not the goal. It's the natural result of spiritual alignment. It's the outer reflection of an inner revolution. But let's be honest, being authentic isn't always easy. It can feel isolating, especially at first. Not everyone will celebrate your truth. Some will resist it. Some will project their discomfort onto you. But that's okay, because the goal was never to be liked by everyone. It was to live in harmony with your own soul, and the more you do, the more you attract those whose frequencies match yours. You begin to form bonds that aren't based on performance, but on presence. This is sacred connection, the kind that nourishes instead of drains, the kind that grows quietly under the light of your authentic fire. So step into your space and speak your truth, walk your path, not with arrogance but with clarity. Know that your journey, messy, mystical, miraculous, is worthy of being lived out loud, not to please, not to provoke, but simply to be. Because when you are yourself fully and unapologetically, you are in tune with the rhythm of the universe. And in that harmony, you not only earn respect, you inspire transformation. From here, the final veil lifts, the realization that peace, that elusive treasure, is not found in trying to be someone, but in fully being who you are. There comes a moment in the seeker's journey when all the striving, all the masks, all the attempts to be enough dissolve into stillness. It's not a dramatic awakening, but a gentle arrival, a return to the self. You begin to realize that peace was never about having more, achieving more, or being more. It was about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. In this remembrance you find not only clarity but freedom, the sacred kind, the kind that isn't loud or flashy, but deeply rooted in spirituality, presence, and truth. Because the moment you give yourself full permission to be who you are, without apology, something ancient within you exhales. To be yourself is the most courageous act in a world that constantly tells you to become someone else. It's not rebellion, it's resurrection. It's reclaiming the fragments you once exiled, the parts of you that were too sensitive, too wild, too weird. In truth, those were never flaws. They were whispers from the universe, marking you as uniquely equipped for your path. Jung called this the process of individuation, the sacred unfolding of the whole self. And while the world may praise conformity, your soul celebrates originality, not the kind built on trends or aesthetics, but the kind forged in shadow, silence, and sacred self-honesty. You don't have to explain yourself anymore. You don't have to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. You don't need permission to feel deeply, speak freely, live fully. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. True mystic expression flows from this place of authenticity. It's in your laugh, your art, your choices, your presence, and the more you embody who you really are, the more life starts to meet you in that place. Synchronicities align. The right people appear. Your path unfolds, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped resisting your own nature. In being yourself, you unlock the peace that comes from no longer hiding. Let your inner world be your compass. Let your intuition speak louder than doubt. Let your joy, not your fear, shape your direction. When you honor your own rhythm, even the chaos starts to make sense. You see your past not as a mistake, but as a mythic journey that led you here. Each wound a teacher, each heartbreak a ritual, each silence a portal. And from this space of wholeness, peace becomes more than a fleeting moment. It becomes your home frequency, the sound your soul makes when it's no longer at war with itself. And so the journey doesn't end here. It begins again from a deeper place. Being yourself is not a destination but a practice, a devotion, a daily dance with the universe where you no longer seek to be anything other than real. That's the highest form of peace. That's the birth of purpose. And that, dear seeker, is the key to everything you've ever longed for. Not outside, but within. And now I ask you, what would your life look like if you finally stopped caring about being enough and simply allowed yourself to be? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know, which part of this message resonated most with your journey? What mask are you ready to take off? Your story might be the spark someone else needs to wake up to. And if this video stirred something deep inside you, don't keep this transformation to yourself. Subscribe now to Celestial Truths and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next chapter of your awakening. Every video here is crafted to guide you back to your essence, one truth at a time. And speaking of the next step, the video that's about to appear on your screen dives even deeper into the symbolic forces shaping your soul's path. Click on it. Keep walking. The universe is still speaking to you, with reverence and truth This is Celestial Truths. Until next time.